Okay, here I am. I'm in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and here is Cathy Kunkel, our congressional candidate, who is at 3 hours and 5 hours drive away, right? 300 miles away in Charleston. Tell us, and Cathy Kunkel, since Naked Capitalism readers have been reading a lot about Thomas Frank, as someone who definitely is educated to be part of the liberal class, creative class, learning class. Tell us about your physics background from Princeton, and yet you are in West Virginia by choice, running what to my mind is a Bernie Sanders type, in the best sense of Bernie Sanders, populist campaign. And you've been on the campaign trail for 13 months now, since September of last year. So tell crossing the huge second district from the Ohio River to the Potomac River.
Yes, that's right. So as you mentioned, I didn't grow up in West Virginia. I grew up outside of Baltimore. Both my parents spent their careers working for the federal government, for the Social Security Administration. I went to Princeton and studied physics there. And I switched into energy policy work in graduate school, and ultimately decided that academia was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be more involved in community work and in seeing how these fights really played out on the ground. And I ended up with what was supposed to be a short-term job in West Virginia, looking at the feasibility of a community wind project. And that was a decade ago. So I came to West Virginia and fell in love with the state, and have been involved in a lot of different initiatives over the last decade. As an energy policy expert, I've testified many times before the Public Service Commission and fought with our state's electric utility monopolies over corporate bailouts that they've tried to get to bail out uncompetitive coal plants in the state. I've also was very involved in the fight for safe drinking water after a chemical spill contaminated the drinking water in Charleston back in 2014. And I decided to run for this seat last year, largely out of frustration with the lack of political leadership on energy and economic transition in this state. We've been seeing the coal industry collapse for the last decade, and neither political party has really put forward much more than empty promises about bringing back the coal industry, as opposed to the real need for revitalizing our economy here, bringing in federal infrastructure investment, and tackling poverty. And that, to me, that means bold economic programs like Medicare for all, universal health care, and universal broadband, and programs that would really help working families here in West Virginia. And so that's what we've been talking about on the campaign trail in this very diverse second congressional district that includes Charleston, the largest city in West Virginia, includes the Eastern Panhandle where you are, and about 14 rural counties in between.
Wow. And then what kind of energy future could you imagine? Well, let's just back up 1 minute, because most people think of West Virginia as perhaps the reddest of the red states, or the most deplorable of the deplorables, if we can use that kind of language. But tell us about who lives in West Virginia, and why Bernie Sanders carried every single county in West Virginia in 2016.
Absolutely, yes. So I would love to push back against that West Virginia as Trump country narrative. West Virginia, I think, is an anti-establishment place more than anything. And people who don't live in West Virginia may not realize that at the state level, the Democratic Party controlled our state legislature in an unbroken rule for more than 80 years, from the New Deal era, from the 30s until 2014. And during that whole time, West Virginia was perpetually one of the poorest states in the country. So, I understand the frustration with the Democratic Party, and of course, the Republican Party's economic policies have not done anything to improve people's condition either, nor were they designed to. But West Virginia is a place that desperately needs change, and you saw that in the overwhelming vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and you saw it again in the teacher and school employee strikes in 2018, when we had thousands of teachers in our capital demanding higher taxes on the natural gas industry to fund public education and public employee health insurance.
They won.
And they won, yes. Well, they didn't win the higher tax on the gas industry, but they won a raise for public employees. So.
And how were you involved in that strike?
So I was actually part of a community group in Charleston that I'd helped to found back in 2017. And we administered a strike fund during that strike that ended up raising online over $300,000 that we distributed back to teachers and school employees on strike to cover, transportation costs and other, hardships from folks who lost pay as a result of the strike. So, yeah, I was deeply involved in that sense, and of course, hugely supportive. I mean, I think it's hard to overestimate the level of popular and community support for the strike here in West Virginia.
And to my mind, that's the only conceivable future for a Democratic Party, at least a Democratic Party that I would vote for after all these years. A party that's, I would say, populist in the sense of an American version of a Labor Party that relies on, bringing people together in unions and, well, the first thing, just bringing people together. And yeah, go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons I was particularly excited to run here in 2020 was because of this initiative called West Virginia Can't Wait that was launched by a Democratic candidate for governor who unfortunately lost in the primary, but he recruited dozens of candidates onto this pledge. That, it was a populist pledge. It was a pledge to not take corporate money in our campaigns, to never cross a picket line. And at the state level, they also had this very inclusive platform building process where they had literally thousands of conversations in communities to build a very populist Bernie Sanders-esque platform at the state level in West Virginia. And although Stephen Smith, who was the candidate for governor, lost in the primary, many of the other candidates, obviously including myself, are through to the general election, and that movement is going to keep building into 2022 and beyond. So I think that really, I think you're right, that is the future of politics in West Virginia, if we're going to truly bring people back into the political process. Because another thing I wanted to say about this stereotype of us as Trump country is, in fact, more than that, we're just a country of people who don't vote, or a state of people who don't vote. More than half of the voting age population of my congressional district just didn't vote in 2016.
And in the spirit of Jimmy Dore, I'd say there's a reason for that.
Exactly. And that's, people think that politics is rigged against them, and it's only for the 1%, it's only for the corporate interests. And there's frankly a lot of truth in that. And that's why I think, something like.
Oh, I just lost audio. Can you repeat that? I didn't have audio for about 5 seconds there. Did you have it?
Sure. People have, understandably lost a lot of faith in the political process. And that's why I think something like West Virginia Can't Wait, that is consistent and building across multiple electoral cycles, is critical for bringing people back into the process.
And tell people who our Democratic Senate candidate is, because she's very much in that spirit.
Yes, she's part of West Virginia Can't Wait. It's Paula Jean Swearingen. She's running against our Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito. She and I have both been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, actually.
Wow. Why do you? Well, let's back up a little. Did you face a primary?
I did not. No other Democrat ran for this seat, so I was lucky in that sense to just be able to slide through into the general.
And then you're running against the incumbent, Alex Mooney. What kind of chance do you think you have of winning?
I think we actually have a pretty good shot. Congressman Mooney is probably the weakest of the three Republican members of Congress here in West Virginia. He won in 2018 with 54% of the vote, and he's literally never here. I mean, he was a state senator in Maryland who moved across the river to run for and win this House seat in 2014. He's
right.
Very rarely in the district. He never has in-person town halls. And he really just hasn't done anything for the district. And beyond that, I mean, with the way that things are looking nationally, I mean, he just runs on his support for President Trump, essentially, and that is certainly down here in West Virginia.
So that's exciting. So you have a real shot.
Exactly.
And then tell people you're only 35, right?
Correct.
That's like, I wish I could be 35 again. So you can, yeah, you've got, yeah. One interesting thing, since we've got a pretty nerdy audience, I would, Congressman Mooney, who's he was chairman of the Maryland Republican Party up until 2014. I mean, he literally just swam across the river and became the congressman. So it's a Republican seat to fill. Yeah, and does he even live here?
He does have a residence in Charlestown. But which
is where I live. I've never seen him here. I've seen. But an interesting thing, since your expertise in energy policy, when he was younger, he worked for Roscoe Bartlett, the Republican in the House. And Bartlett, back 15 years ago, and was a surprise, he was he was probably the most outspoken and clear-headed advocate, even though he was a Republican, back around 2000, 2005, talking about peak oil and the end of petroleum type of issues. And Mooney was his assistant. That's just odd. But talk about
Roscoe Bartlett was actually my congressperson for a long time. I mentioned that I grew up in Maryland.
Oh, really? And what did you think of Bartlett back then? Did you know?
I mean, I wasn't that political when I was growing up, when I was a teenager. So I don't really know, but I do believe he moved off. When he retired from Congress, he went off the grid entirely, in solar home and all that. So.
I believe that, but so in some sense, Bartlett was a visionary. So tell us about what kind of post-coal, post-petroleum, post-carbon future West Virginia could have.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, right now, West Virginia has been in the middle of a transition away from the coal economy for the last decade. The coal industry has been declining. The market share has largely been eaten by natural gas, honestly, but some renewable energy. And we just haven't been managing this transition at all. As I said, we've just had a lot of empty political promises about bringing back coal. But West Virginia needs billions of dollars of federal investment in basic infrastructure, like reliable internet, safe drinking water, public transportation. If we're going to diversify our economy and bring in a clean energy economy here, as well as just other sectors of the economy, whether it's tourism or agriculture, what have you. I mean, basic reliable internet and safe drinking water are fundamentals that are lacking in many parts of the state. And in fact, I would say that broadband internet is the single issue that I hear the most about on the campaign trail.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, it just doesn't exist in a real way in so many parts of the district. And even before the pandemic, people were very frustrated with the lack of internet service in rural West Virginia and even some non-rural parts of the state. And West Virginia really kind of made a decision at the state level like a decade ago that we were going to rely on Frontier to build out broadband internet infrastructure in the state. And that was obviously a terrible decision. I mean, it's not profitable for them to do it, and they haven't done it. And we need to be investing in local solutions, like community-owned broadband or cooperatives. The best example of reliable broadband internet in my district actually is a rural telephone cooperative that decided to invest in broadband about a decade ago.
Huh. So really the history of West Virginia going back to 1863 is the history of economic exploitation, especially of natural resources, especially coal and then forests and various metals. And so talk about just the need for basic human resources in a place that's been so exploited for so many decades.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, West Virginia has had billions of dollars of wealth extracted from our state. I mean, very natural resource rich state. In fact, ironically, if you go to the town of Williamson, which is in the heart of the southern coal fields in Mingo County, there's a sign that says "Welcome to the billion-dollar coal fields." And I've always found it very ironic because it's one of the poorest parts of the state. The $1 billion has obviously not stayed in Mingo County. And yeah, I mean, there's so much basic needs that we have here, whether it's healthcare or we have food deserts in many parts of the state. Public education is underfunded, and teachers are often moving across state lines to get paid $10,000 or even $20,000 more in a neighboring county in another state. And like I said, we have very serious infrastructure needs here. And that's exactly why I think a platform like ours is so important, because people grapple with these struggles every day, and I think people are looking for leadership that actually says, in the richest country in the world, why can't we repay this debt that the rest of the country owes to Appalachia? Why can't we guarantee healthcare to all of our citizens as a human right?
And okay, so that's the step one. Step two, what kind of an economic future would this state have? What we've got all these people with huge unemployment rates, huge. I think the highest percentage in the United States of opioid addiction in West Virginia. Is it the highest in the country? It's one of them.
It's up there. I mean, yeah, overdose deaths are among the highest in the country for sure.
Which I'm going to connect directly with unemployment and underemployment, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's directly tied to the economic conditions of the state, and to the exploitation by pharmaceutical companies who pumped millions of pills into the state over the last decade.
And once again, extracted a lot of wealth.
Exactly.
They got yeah, the Sackler family, they're multi-billionaires. But so there's a need for just a basic infrastructure, from healthcare to clean water and to decent internet service and teachers who make a living wage. But after doing that, what do people do? What kind of economy could West Virginia have in a post-coal world? And,
I mean,
again,
West
they're only
Virginia,
1.7, 1.8. It's a small state. There are less than 2 million people here.
right? And it's a state that's losing population too, and has been for decades as a result of our persistent economic problems here. But I mean, I think there's a lot that people are trying to do at the local level around agriculture, around tourism. I mean, we're very close to DC, and we're a beautiful state, and I think there's a lot of potential in that. If we're serious about transitioning to a clean energy economy in this country over the next couple of decades, that is going to generate a lot of jobs everywhere, I think, in weatherization and clean energy manufacturing. So, and if we had reliable internet, it would be, and if we had anti-monopoly practices that, actually supported small business development, there's a lot more that we could do with small businesses here. I mean, I talked to a young woman who moved back to a rural part of West Virginia and is, trying, because she is from there, and she's trying to run a video production company in this rural town that has not very great internet, and it's obviously very challenging. And that story is multiplied 100-fold across the state. So I mean, the infrastructure needs really are, I think, fundamental to creating a better climate for small business too.
Was it, who said it to me? It might have been better had there never been coal in West Virginia, because then today it would just be another Vermont. Did you say that? Who said that to me?
I think I made a comment along those lines.
But it would be, a laid back, happy state.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it just, it would be a very different economy. I mean, it is certainly a place that has been exploited for many decades, as you said.
And then one issue that concerns me a lot now, and it's so touchy. I call it by the academic term, but critical theory. and critical theory, especially critical race theory, is coming into, so many in banking and so many of the schools. And I see it as fundamentally divisive because what are the bestsellers now? The books by Robin DiAngelo and Ibram X. Kendi, where people are forced into training. And I think the effect of critical theory or woke theory is it sets white people and black people, it sets men and women against each other, which is to the advantage of large corporations. It's the opposite of what you'd want, and of a union, which is, bringing all different kinds of people together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that much about the academic side of it. I've been out of academia for a long time, but I mean, it's clear that there is a very obvious effort on the part of those in power now to try to use racism and fear to divide people against each other. And, the obviously communities of color in this country have suffered disproportionately on a lot of different grounds, whether it's, being blocked from accumulating wealth for generations, or the racist police brutality and criminal justice system. So I mean, there are real issues that obviously need to be addressed. But yeah, I agree that fundamentally we need to be working on working for programs that are to the benefit of the 99%, not the 1%. And it's clearly the interest of the 1% to try to divide us and get us fighting amongst each other.
Okay, and I want people, and I'm going to link to this, but I want people watching this to know, I just saw this on the Jimmy Dore show, and we hope you can be on Jimmy Dore soon. On the Jimmy Dore show last night, he interviewed a young filmmaker named Eleanor Goldfield, who has just done a brilliant 50-minute film about West Virginia, going back to its history in 1863. And the whole point that she makes in the film is West Virginia was founded to be exploited by corporate interests. That's why it came into existence. So it's a profound eye-opening in the most frightening sense. It's a frightening film. But the hopeful part of the film is she talks about how the unions came together, and the miners who were West Virginia was always underpopulated. So you'd have Black miners, you'd have a lot of immigrant miners. Here in this part of the state, they still have pepperoni rolls. Do you have them out in the other side?
Oh yes, that's
the
a
miners,
very West Virginia thing.
Italian guys, and they take pepperoni rolls into the mines. So that's something people don't know about West Virginia, but it was, and part of the point was to bring in, every possible ethnic group and create a Tower of Babel effect where they couldn't talk to each other. But
and it's amazing that people were able to organize in those conditions. I mean, across racial lines, across ethnic lines, across language barriers, as you said. But I mean, they did it. They came together and won a union in the Southern coalfields. And yeah, that should absolutely be an inspiration for all of us for what needs to happen now.
Yeah, and so that's what I think. And whatever the Democratic Party becomes, if it's not the Democratic Party, we need a populist party. But that's the kind of thing, something that organizes for the 99%. And it's really inspirational to know that it has been, despite all the horrible things that continue to exist in West Virginia, it has been done here.
Exactly.
And that's something. So I'm really excited, and I've sent your campaign manager the link to that film. Her name is Eleanor Goldfield. So it's the history of West Virginia going back to 1863. And I think she's getting maybe an award from the Cannes Film Festival. So it's, wow.
Great.
So
yeah.
Hooray for West Virginia. Let's see.
That history needs to be told more widely, for sure.
And that history has been suppressed. And yeah, this is a part of American history. Maybe I should do a book on it. But yeah, this is a history, and because Thomas Frank, just had that book on populism come out. Maybe this is an extension of here's real populism in perhaps one of the most depressed and exploited parts of the United States. And so, how long have you lived in West Virginia?
I've lived in West Virginia for a decade. I came here in 2010.
And then for the last 13 months in September of last year, okay, and then the second district is over 300 miles wide, maybe the widest congressional district east of the Mississippi.
That's what I've been told. I have not independently verified that, but it certainly seems believable when you're driving through it.
Where I live, I can actually go swim, walk over and swim in the Shenandoah, and the other end is literally on the banks of the Ohio River. So
Exactly.
that's like
Yeah.
it's not quite a different time zone, but it might as well be. What's your feeling? So 13 months crossing, this 300 plus mile wide strip. Just to tell us a little bit about what the feel is.
I mean, I think there's a lot that unites people across this district, even though it is pretty diverse economically. But like I was saying, lack of reliable internet is an issue across much of the district. Constantly hear stories about our broken healthcare system, stories about the addiction epidemic. So, it's a diverse district, and obviously, there are different economic strategies in different parts of the state for local economic development. And your part of the state is actually growing while the rest of the district is declining in population. But in some of the big issues where we need transformative change in this country, those issues are true whether you're on the Ohio River or in Harper's Ferry.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's. I think this is a good place to stop. Okay. Well, say something before we say goodbye. What's your hope for West Virginia? What's your hope for the United States?
Well, I mean, my hope is that we can really transform, the Democratic Party and the politics of this country with candidates that are rejecting the sort of establishment status quo of corporate politics. And it's really exciting, to be a candidate that's, not taking corporate money. I can tell you that resonates across the district. People are fed up with politicians that are just, obviously in it for their own self-interest, and go to DC and come back a lot wealthier than when they left. It's exciting to be part of something like West Virginia Can't Wait that's actually organizing past this election, because too often we see a candidate who builds up a great infrastructure for a campaign, and then it all just fizzles the day after the election. And so we really need to be building up this kind of long-term infrastructure in West Virginia and around the country. And I'm excited that that's starting to happen.
Okay, that's a good. So this has been Cathy Kunkel, the candidate for the United States Congress from the super wide district, the second district of West Virginia, for Naked Capitalism. Okay, thank you so much, Cathy.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything, if you want to cut anything out of that, take it out. If something. At one point we lost the audio. If you want to cut.
Yeah, sorry, I just got it back, but wait. Oh, sorry, I thought I stopped recording.